challenges on this project really came from the fact that the house was built in the late 1700s. So nothing was plumb, nothing was square, nothing was level. And when you're doing a kitchen renovation, particularly, cabinets have to be hung so that they're square to the ceiling and square to the floor, otherwise it just doesn't look right. So we had to make sure that we squared everything off and made everything plumb, but at the same time it all had to fit with the remainder of the house that was remaining. And that was one of the biggest challenges, and I think in the end we really accomplished that. So, you know, the new parts of the house all look great, but they all blend in really well with the existing parts. And even where a new floor met an old floor, Tony was a master at making sure that that transition you know, just looked as good as it possibly could.
When we found this house, we were 6 miles away, still in Sudbury, just in the north part of Sudbury. But we lived in a contemporary, which we loved. It was wonderful. It had 4 acres. It was terrific. But both of us always wanted a farmhouse, an antique farmhouse. And Bruce always wanted a house on a hill. So that was like, you know, a little hard to identify where we were going to go, but we wanted to stay in the town. We just looked at every antique that came on the market. And when this came on the market, we looked at it and didn't do anything about it. But we couldn't get it out of our minds. So, and it had no offers on it. And maybe 9 months later, we called our broker and said, gee, are they still thinking to sell that house? And she said, well, she would check. And we came over. It was not staged. It was not anything. And we realized it really was the place we wanted to be. There were 2 people who lived here before, and it was beautifully done, very charming, gorgeous antiques and things, but it wasn't really set up for a family with 3 kids, 3 cats, and lots of friends in and out. So we realized we were going to have to make a lot of changes before it became our place.
Once I meet a client for the first time, a potential client, I then set up a series of meetings to go over the scope and really develop the scope and the contract with them. And during that time, I get to know them. I get to be in their house. I get to meet their families. And based on how that goes, I kind of get a feeling for what they're going to need. So if I feel that they're going to need hand-holding, I will try to put one of my project supervisors on that project that's really good at that, and someone that's a calming influence.
One of the things that they do is they assign a particular foreman or sort of manager for your project. And I think Gary thought pretty carefully about who he chose for us, and he gave us Tony Giordano. And again, that fit was perfect. And as I said, I still wake up in the morning and kind of miss Tony. Like, where is he? I like having him around. He's a beautiful person. He can build anything. He's a magician. But what we wanted is someone who would really understand what we were trying to get to. We're not builders, we're not designers. We can't talk that language, but we needed them to be able to translate what we wanted. And Gary got it. He literally walked onto the property and felt the same way about it that we did. So it made it really easy. Plus, then it turned out that there were other people at my office who said, oh, the remodeling company, we used them too. We went online, we looked at all of the portfolios, and it was exactly what we wanted.
In the end, it does come down to scheduling a lot of the times. So, but no matter who I put with people, we have really competent project supervisors, so it usually works out.
I think everything started with the kitchen and blossomed out from there. And the kitchen originally here was like something from the 1950s. It was a great functional kitchen, but it was really the most difficult part of conceptually of what we were getting into was, you know, trying to figure out how that kitchen was going to be remodeled.
When we have big pieces of granite, like on an island, which are wider, you know, a typical countertop is roughly 2 feet deep, so you can bring in long pieces. But when you have an island that comes in one piece, it's long, it can be long and wide. And so we have to give it a lot of thought in advance of how are we actually going to get this into the house.
Can you go up an inch? Right there. Okay.
Because you also have to remember that it has to fit through a doorway. So if you don't plan accordingly and the granite shows up and it turns out it's bigger than the doorway, you've got a problem. So we do a lot of pre-planning, and then in the case on this project, we had a really large island. We made sure we had plenty of help so that we could safely bring it in, not only for for the guy's safety, so that nobody got hurt, but also so that there wasn't, we diminished the chance of someone dropping it and damaging it. So it takes a lot of planning up front.
Did we start with an idea and did we end up with the same idea? Absolutely not. We wanted to make the house livable for our size family. And then we got into it and things kind of expanded.
When you're building a new home, there's no surprises. You know, you come up out of the ground and everything's on the plans, and so there's really no surprises. But in remodeling, when we're going into older homes, there are always surprises. So the first thing I do when I'm meeting with people is I tell them, no matter how the contract comes in for a price, figure another 10%. And that 10% might cover unforeseen things like rotten framing behind walls, or bad wiring that's hidden, or bad plumbing that's hidden. And it also covers, once we get something, a house demoed and we're starting to do the frame, a lot of times at that point, people really get a sense for what it's going to feel like. So even though they're working off a really good set of plans, until you actually stand in the space, a lot of times you really don't understand, and the average person doesn't understand, geez, what's this going to feel like when I actually go to put a couch in this living room? And so those kinds of changes will happen from time to time.
We have a friend who loves this house as well, and she was with us all the way through the process. The kitchen was a sunroom and a very small kitchen, which they opened up and turned into the kitchen that it is now. When she finally came over when we were done, she looked around and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you kept all the original beams." And in fact, in the house, we kept a lot of the original beams. But she looked in the kitchen, she said, "I'm so glad because it looks so beautiful." Yeah, none of those beams are original. Tony built all of them. He can build anything. He's a magician, and that's what he did. He made it look like it was the original parts of the house.
When we took the floor apart, we found that the floor was a mess and had rot in it. And Tony thought of a way that we could actually lower the floor a little bit and level it at the same time, because the floor was way out of level. So we wound up, if you look at the before and after pictures, we have this really like a cave-like kitchen. And now it's just a gorgeous kitchen with a full-height ceiling and beautiful cabinetry, and you would never know that could have been done in such a really small, limiting space.
They came up with some really ingenious ways of adding space, headroom space. And so at one point, it was just a hollow shell inside, and then they restructured the floor for the upstairs and lowered the floor going into the basement, and it worked out beautifully.
We did have other matters that we needed to take care of during the time that they were doing construction. And they knew us well enough that I think with anyone else, they would probably have to go back, do you want this, do you want this, asking questions, making decisions all the time. And we went to Gary and Tony and said, we can't be here day to day right now. We have some medical issues we need to deal with. Do what's best. And they did. They knew what we needed, and they just took care of it. They just took care of it. It was hugely comforting. And then we'd come in and it would be perfect. So I'm not sure how that worked, but I think it's because they listened really carefully.
So at one point, we talked to her about this situation, and she was adamant about keeping the project moving, and she actually said to us, make sure you keep me on schedule. And so we did, and Melissa worked really closely with her, as did Tony, and they were able to make their selections, and the project went as smoothly as possible.
The house now is the perfect container. So it'll be, I figure, it'll take us 10 years to get the whole property and the final furniture in. But the container is exactly the way we want it. So now it's sort of up to us to find what needs to go in it. And you know what? That's the fun part.
Once we moved in and we were living here, we noticed certain things that hadn't come up while they were going through the process. And we have even noticed some things that we'd like to change, minor things, but that as we're living here, we realized we would like things differently. And they've been very good with follow-up, and I guess we're in a sort of a warranty period anyway, but I mean, Tony has been excellent. He just, every once in a while, will check in with us. Are there certain things, how's everything, what have you noticed? And they're back to do adjustments or finish off things that might have been missed. They've been very good with that.
there were some moments where they would roll their eyes a little bit. So, for example, in the upstairs in the barn, I just wanted them to refinish the floors. And they said, well, this is subflooring. I said, I know, but here's what I want. And it came out beautifully. Same thing with the cupola. When we were designing our bedroom, I wanted like a barn-style cupola on the top. And I think there was a little something about that. And then I wanted beams that you can see from the ceiling. But they would think about it. They would really consider it. They would never just dismiss me. They would consider it, and then they would do it in a way that I hadn't really fully thought out, because I don't know how to do that, but they knew how to do it.
We listen to what they would like to do. We never tell a client that's impossible and then just dismiss their ideas. We'll look at it. If there's a way to do it, or if there's more than one way to do it, we'll let them know. Or we may say, well, we can't do it exactly that way, but how about this? And we'll give them some suggestions. We understand that most people have never been through a remodeling project before, particularly a large project. So we want to be as helpful as possible, and we want to listen to their ideas.
Remember all of the screens on this porch?
Oh, that's right.
They were originally, I think, stapled onto wood frames, and they were not removable. They were not. Yeah, and Gary he thought about it for a long time, and he finally just came up with this really brilliant design where they're sort of they're framed, and they can be taken out as framed screens.
Yeah, so it used to be that it was all rolled out across it. So if you had one rip one place, you were dead. You know, because you'd have these. Now you can take out each one if there's something that happens. And because we have 3 cats and 3 kids and lots of other kid, company, I don't expect these screens to last forever. So if one of them gets a tear in it, we can replace just that little bit.
Gary was very good at, when we would discuss what type of windows or what type of wood, he was able to sort of give us all of the parameters. This is the most expensive way, this is the least expensive way, and then here's what I recommend, here's what I use for my own home. And it was usually very affordable, and it worked, and it looked great, and always really great advice. So very happy for that.
A remodeling project, it's funny because we do our own framing a lot. And one of the reasons we do that is because the guys that are doing the framing are doing the finish work. So they want to make sure that when they're putting in the crown molding and the baseboard and the window and door casings, that everything is going to line up perfectly. And sometimes when you bring in a framing crew, sometimes, not all the time, that kind of detail can be missing, and then it comes out in the finish. So we're really focused on every aspect of the project, from the demolition. When we do demolition in someone's home, if we're doing a bathroom or a kitchen and the family is still living in the home, we're really careful about masking everything off and sealing everything off so that dust doesn't get in the way. That kind of attention to detail follows us all the way through the project. So whether it's a clean job site, whether it's solid project management, the details on the finish and the cabinetry, the painting, the quality of the painting, that all is very important to us, and that's really what we've based our reputation on the last 19 years. 90% of our business is past customers and referrals, and I think a lot of it has to do with our attention to detail.
I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't change anything, which surprises me. All of the people at the remodeling company are so good at what they do, they can look at things and give you the best advice on how to do it. Yeah, it's very honest, and it's been terrific.